just hit publish. It's not going to be the best starting out. I even tell people my first few episodes, they sucked, and I'm okay with that because I've grown, I've evolved, and now I'm coming up on 100 episodes and my content is so much better. But if I hadn't actually gotten started, I wouldn't be to where I'm at today.
Welcome back to Unknown and Talented. I'm your host, Jelan Abrams. Today we have Andria. She's a wife, mother, podcast coach and strategist, and the host of Mama Turned Mompreneur Podcast, teaching mothers how to build podcasts. Actually, I messed it up. I teach mothers how to build a business through podcasting. How you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
So one question real quick. Mompreneur, did you come up with that name? I like that name.
Well, it's kind of a term that's kind of been around like for mom business owners. So instead of like just calling us an entrepreneur, we call ourselves mompreneurs.
Oh, I love that. So I said, okay, that's a pretty cool name. Okay. All right. But before I get into like my questions, I just want you to pretty much be able to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and pretty much what you do.
Yeah. So again, my name is Andria Singletary. I'm a wife, mom of two. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I'm a podcast coach and strategist. I support mom business owners with creating a podcast that generates leads for their businesses. I'm based in Southern California, and just me, my husband, and our 2 kids. Most of our family lives out of state, so we kind of do it all together. He is my best friend and my partner in all of this. So yeah.
That's good. I love it. I love the support. And does your kids help you out? I know you said just 3 and 1, but are they helping out with the business too?
Not really.
So what made you want to become an entrepreneur?
So I've always kind of had the entrepreneurial spirit in me. Ever since I was a kid, I was that kid that would like create bracelets and sell them at school, making money like that. But I honestly pivoted into it after I had my son. I had my son at the height of the pandemic. And at the time I was a preschool director and my job actually shut down while I was on maternity leave. And so I became a stay-at-home mom. And I was at first pursuing a master's degree in communication disorders because I wanted to be a speech therapist. Didn't like how much of it like took my time and took me away from my son, and I wasn't the present mom that I wanted to be. So I disenrolled from the program and decided to pursue entrepreneurship. I wanted to build a business that allowed me to be home with my kids, to be there for all of those first moments and everything. I actually started out as a virtual assistant and then decided to niche in the podcasting industry.
Okay, I like that. And so with podcasting, you're able to balance your time a little better. How does that work?
Yeah, so the nice thing is that if I'm managing a client's podcast, we don't have to communicate as much. Like we have monthly check-ins, especially like if we're planning podcast content for the upcoming month. But other than that, I'm handling all the behind the scenes stuff. And so I get to set my own hours. My clients, they are able to contact me via Voxer. But again, I'm not having to jump on a bunch of meetings or anything like that. And then the same thing kind of goes for my launch clients. We have our initial meeting where we're mapping out their entire podcast and planning out that timeline. But after that, a lot of it is just communication via Voxer and me handling a lot of like the behind the scenes stuff.
Okay. So speak more of the transition of being a mother and then starting a business. Because I know you said that, you were always an entrepreneur, but I know the minute you became a mother, that's a entirely different experience. Like that's taking up all of your time. How do you transition between just being a mother and now also adding a business to that?
So for me, my family, that's my number one priority. So I build my business around them. So for instance, I'm only available to my clients certain days of the week, certain times. And I like to plan that around, nap time or my son, he was going to preschool, so I would plan it around that as well. So that's one of the things that I do, but also to just kind of being mindful of like what my current season of life is and having that open communication with my husband. So like letting him know like, hey, I have a big project coming up, I need you to take off work, or I need you, to be home so you can be responsible for the kids and I can get this done. So I really do it that way. Like I said, we have that open communication, and that really allows me to pursue this business and everything.
I love that. I love that. So, what would you say to that mother? Because I have a sister and she's an entrepreneur as well. So she's, working as hard as she can. But what would you say to those mothers that struggle, being a mother and also trying to start their own business? Because a lot of people now want to be entrepreneurs, but trying to have that balance. Because you said you're doing a great job. But what would you say to someone that's probably struggling in that area?
I would say just remember that each season of motherhood, it's just a season. So we have that season when our kids are really little and they are solely dependent upon us. Then they get older. They start elementary school. They're more independent. They're not waking us up at 5, 6 in the morning and different things like that. And so I would say like whatever those dreams are, don't, put them off, or don't, completely disregard them. Write them down. And then as your season of life changes and you have that time available, you have the capacity to pursue those other things, then start pursuing them then. So for me, that's kind of why I shifted more into the coaching space, because I'm able to coach my clients without having to do like a lot of one-on-one service provider work. Like I still have my podcast production side of things, but I'm also able to serve more women, like with my group coaching program and everything. And that only really requires for me to show up once a week for a call with them. And that gives me a lot more time freedom. So really looking at what can you change in your business to give you that time freedom? Another thing I've done is that I don't really hop on sales calls anymore. Like if you have additional questions, we can either talk about it in the DMs or Voxer or something like that. So really looking at how you can shift your business so that it fits that season of life you're currently in.
I love that. I love that. Because you're like, I'm the boss, and however you want to reach me, I'm going to make sure I plan it out for that, because you can't just get all my time. I have kids, and my kids are first. And I do love that. But how long have you been podcasting for?
1.5 years.
1.5 years. Okay, perfect. And how did you get introduced to podcasting?
So I actually, like I said, I had my son at the height of the pandemic. And so at that time, when you're a new mom, you normally get that support. You have people coming to help you and everything. But with COVID, I didn't get that. Everybody was social distancing and everything. And so to kind of still have like that mom village and to normalize the things that I was going through as a new mom, I looked to podcasts. And as I listened to more podcasts and just really looking at how amazing it was that I identified so much with the host, that I felt so connected to them and everything, I started wondering like, well, who supports them with actually getting their podcasts out into the world? And so just doing a Google search, I came across this podcast manager program created by Lauren Wrighton. And I absolutely loved everything she stood for. She's a mom too. And she kind of shifted her career and everything to better like be present for her kids and her husband and everything. And so I joined her program, learned everything I needed to learn to start supporting people with their podcasts, and kind of went from there.
Okay. And I definitely listened to your podcast. You were well spoken. I know you wanted to be a speech therapist, but have you ever had any challenges of being nervous of doing it? Because podcasting is kind of different. You're sitting in front of a mic and like listening to yourself back. How's that experience? Like your first episode you ever recorded?
Honestly, I transitioned into it pretty easily. Back when I was a preschool director, I actually spoke at like a lot of different conferences and everything. So I've had that, public speaking experience and whatnot. I'm also an introvert though. And so I felt like with my podcast, because it was just me, I was able to better like express myself, communicate my thoughts and different things like that. And so I didn't feel as much nervousness as I thought I would.
I'm an introvert as well. It's definitely a lot easier to turn this on and just, just put it out. But have you ever thought about like doing a full conference with a full crowd? Because as your audience builds, they might want to see more of you. Have you ever thought about doing anything like that?
So off record, I was invited to speak at a conference for mom podcasters next year. So
Okay.
I will be doing that next year. I'm not going to say the name because they haven't officially announced it yet, but that is something I am transitioning into, especially like my kids are getting older and everything. And so I'm able to go and do those types of things and, leave them with my husband and whatnot.
That's exciting. Well, we're gonna speak in existence. It will happen. It will happen. So are you like nervous about that experience? Because like you said, you're used to being in your home in your safe space. Now being in front of people, are you nervous about it?
No, I'm actually really excited. They have a pretty amazing lineup for the overall conference, and it's a lot of mompreneurs that I look up to. And so just getting to be in the same room with them and, be their equals and everything and, lead these panel discussions and everything with them, I'm really, really excited about that.
That's really good. That's really good. Okay, so let's speak more about like helping business owners, mothers, exactly building their business. Well, why do you think podcasting is the best way to go?
Honestly, I have found that as a mom, I can easily record a podcast episode versus trying to record a reel, trying to record a video for YouTube, trying to do all these other things. And I've really been able to expand my reach. So I have listeners across the globe. And I've also found that I'm able to better connect with my audience. I have people who, they come into my world through my podcast and they either join my email list or connect with me on Instagram. And they always tell me, I love your podcast. I love your content. I love what you're saying. I resonate with that. And so I've found that this system has basically simplified the whole marketing process for me. I'm able to put out 1 to 2 episodes per week, but I'm still bringing in a lot of new leads for my business daily without me having to churn out so much content. And I've found with a lot of moms and just business owners in general, we're getting burnt out on social media. You have to put out so much content, especially for Instagram. In a sense, you have to feed the beast in order to see those results. And it's exhausting, especially when you're a mom with little ones. You don't have all the time to create multiple pieces of content to put out every day, so it just simplifies that whole content creation process. But also, too, I am big on content repurposing. So I'll take my podcast episodes and repurpose them into like emails to my list and repurpose them for like blogs on my website and do all of these other things. And one thing I hear back from people is like, wow, I found you over here, but I come and listen to your podcast or I read your blog and it's like your messaging is clear. Like, I know who you're speaking to. I know who you're reaching. And so it just creates this cohesiveness in my messaging and everything. And I just think that is what you need as a mom. You need simplicity, especially you're trying to build this business. You want it to succeed. You want to hit your income goals and stuff, but your time is limited realistically. And so just simplifying that entire process, I've been able to do that through my podcast and teach my clients that as well.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. So I do like how you're saying get away from the social media because, social media, you got to make the reels, you got to make the video, you got to think about now you're just using that podcast and just repurposing it. But how are you actually promoting it then? If you're not using social media, you're not using YouTube.
So I am very big on SEO. So, people finding me organically and whatnot, but also too, so when I've been speaking at like a lot of virtual summits and participating in bundles where, you're growing your email list and whatnot, and I always make my call to action my podcast. So I view my podcast as the top of my sales funnel. And so when I'm getting in front of somebody else's audience, I'm directing them to my podcast. That is my call to action because my podcast does all of the heavy lifting for me. I'm almost at 100 episodes now. And people, when they start listening to my podcast, they tell me, oh, I'm binging your episodes. Like, they get to know me, they get to know my expertise and how I can help them and everything. And so that is how I market it. If I'm guesting on a podcast, like your podcast right now, I'm going to tell people, hey, you can connect with me on my podcast. That is how I do that. But also too, I am active on Facebook. And so there are some Facebook groups where they have a weekly thread where you can share like your free resource or about your podcast. And I just drop a link there. So there's certain things that I am doing, but I'm not relying solely on social media. I am on Instagram, but if you go to my Instagram page, I have the 9 grid feed. I'm not posting, weekly on my feed or anything like that. But I do show up in my stories because that's something that doesn't take a lot of my time and it's something I actually enjoy doing. But yeah, that's how I market my podcast.
That's good. That's good. I love it. And you're big on helping, mothers build a business through their podcast. How many like different examples you have of businesses that you helped with podcasting?
So I've supported quite a few women in different capacities. Like I said, I've launched probably over 10 podcasts now. I've managed, I don't even know, quite a few podcasts now, but also I have worked with clients like one-on-one just for like, I call them power hour sessions where I help them plan out their podcast content. Because a lot of times when podcasters come to me, they struggle with how to actually create content that is going to lead their listeners into their offers. And so in the power hour sessions, I support them with that. And I've helped quite a few, women with that as well. So I can't think of a number off the top of my head, but I've supported a lot of women in different capacities with their podcasts.
Mm-hmm. So is it only women, or do you also help out men as well? Like I know there's dadpreneurs as well.
So I have nothing against men or anything like that. It's just that my brand is Mama Turned Mompreneur, and it calls in women. Now, not all of my clients are moms, but they're all female. So
Gotcha. I got it. All right. So you did talk a lot about the podcast, how that's able to, explode by SEO and everything. But also looking at your page, you talk about private podcasting. What is that?
So yeah, private podcast is a podcast, but basically it's not searchable on the podcast platforms. People have to basically opt in order to get access to it. So this is something I support clients with using. They're really great. Like if you want to focus on a specific topic or reach a specific group within your audience. I'm currently supporting a client with setting one up to nurture her audience and convert them into her newest offer. But it's a really great way where you just put together like this mini series of episodes, and it's really great for building your email list, because basically you set up your landing page, they give over their email, and then they get access to the private podcast. But yeah, it's like more specific. So like on your traditional podcast, you may talk about a lot of different things, but with your private podcast, you're going to pick a specific topic and you're going to focus on that, and really use it to kind of lead your listeners into a specific offer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I like that. All right. So basically you don't start that until your actual regular podcast is doing well, because I think about like trying to build that podcast and also having that on the side. Or do you already have that for your extra people that want to do more?
So you don't have to like have a traditional podcast first before you create a private podcast. You can use your private podcast in many ways. So like for those who are really, big on building their email list, you can create a private podcast as your lead magnet in a sense. You also can monetize that private podcast. So if you want to make it so that people have to pay a fee in order to access it, and it's exclusive content that they can't get access to anywhere else, you can do that. Some people create a monthly subscription with the private podcast, and they put out, an episode maybe once or twice a month. with that private podcast. But yeah, you don't have to have a traditional one first before you start a private podcast.
Okay, okay. So how do you run yours? Is it going to be like subscription based, or is it just like extra to help you get more leads?
So the private podcast that I've created, I did one back in July. It was called a pop-up private podcast, and basically it was just available for a week. And so I used it to grow my email list, but at the end, I sold people into an offer that I had, and it was like a limited time offer. So I basically used it for that. I really like to use it to build my email list because I like to use my email list alongside my podcast to grow my business.
Okay, okay. And what? So I ain't gonna lie, this sounds amazing. I love this story. But what struggles have you faced? Because I know you said you had your children, and then you also have your husband's support, and then you was able to build this podcast. But were any struggles along the way to get where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest struggle is not really having that family support. So at the start of this year, my mom moved out of state, and she was the main person who would help us out with the kids and everything. My husband, he works Monday through Friday and really long hours, and so I pretty much solo parent during the week. So I would say my biggest struggles probably was just like a lot of mindset, things like wondering if I'm going to be able to make this business work, dealing with imposter syndrome, being exhausted and burnt out and everything. So I would say those were probably like the biggest struggles I've dealt with, and still comes up every now and then. It's not all rainbow, sunshine, and daisies over here. It is a lot of work, especially, like I said, having two little ones, and you don't know what's going to happen each day. You don't know if somebody's going to wake up sick. You don't know if somebody's going to decide, hey, I'm getting up at 4 a.m. this morning. This is what we're doing. So, you really don't have control over those things, but you still, you have to be that present mom and still make things work, with your business and, getting your client work done and all of that.
Okay, and you said imposter syndrome. What do you mean by that?
So I think probably one of the biggest things I know for me as a mom is like you see people on social media doing all of these things, hitting these goals and whatnot, and you start to question yourself, wondering if you're doing enough, wondering if you could be doing more. So I think that is something I've struggled with at times, and even just wondering if I should keep going with my business and whatnot. And so those are things that I really had to work through. One, stop comparing myself to others and just focus on myself and what I have going on and whatnot. But also, two, really getting clear on those things that are going to move the needle forward in my business and focusing on those things. So one of the things I discovered is that Instagram was a time suck for me. I did not see the results that I wanted to see, and I was churning out so much content and still not really, getting in enough leads to build my business in the way that I wanted to. And so I pulled back from Instagram and eventually switched to the 9 grid and whatnot, and now use it in a way that feels good to me. And I've also gotten to the point where I'm not just scrolling on there anymore. I have found that when I was constantly putting out content on my feed, I would end up just scrolling on the app. I don't do that anymore. And so not only has it gotten me away from like comparing myself to others, but now I have more time because I'm not wasting time scrolling on the app. So
I love that, and I definitely agree with that. And the thing about Instagram is like everybody's putting their highlights on there. It's never their failures. Nobody's gonna post, "I just had a bad day, guys." What I'm saying? Or if they do, that's not gonna be something that's gonna be popular. Everything is gonna be, "Oh, I did 20 things today, and here's how you do 20 things," or "I just sold all these things." So it's never gonna be that. So I'm definitely happy that you did realize that that wasn't something for you, and you said, "You know what? I'm gonna get off of here and be productive." Well, you're doing a great job, because I ain't gonna lie, I found you on Apple Podcast. I was just searching, entrepreneur podcast, business podcast, and yours popped up, and I said, okay, I like that. I like Mompreneur. That's a pretty cool name, like I said. So that's how to make sure I had to contact you. One more question before we get close to the end. Okay, so right now, your business is where it is right now. Somebody's listening to this podcast is thinking about doing exactly what you're doing. What would you tell to that person that's starting in the same situation you are? What would you say to that person that's just starting today?
Honestly, just get started. Just do it. I think a lot of times we can just get caught up in our head and we overthink it so much that we don't take action. And I tell people this all the time, even with their podcasts, just hit publish. It's not going to be the best starting out. I even tell people my first few episodes, they sucked. And I'm okay with that because I've grown, I've evolved, and now I'm coming up on 100 episodes and my content is so much better. But if I hadn't actually gotten started, I wouldn't be to where I'm at today. So I just think that in general with business, like if you have this dream, just go for it. You're not going to know what's going to happen until you try.
I love it. I appreciate it. Andria, let everybody know where to find you, your podcast name, everything. Just do your sales pitch.
Yeah, so my podcast is Mama Turned Mompreneur. It's available on all of the podcast platforms, and everything is basically Mama Turned Mompreneur. My website, my Instagram handle, all of that. So, yeah.
I appreciate it, and good luck with your business. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with my audience. All right, so
Thank
again,
you.
my name is Jelan Abrams, unknown and talented. We have Andria. We'll see you next week.